Today's workshop is finding a summer camp. There's a summer camp in New England for every camper. And I'm excited to introduce to you Bud Copeland, the Director of Membership and Engagement, American Camp Association, New England, and Karen Price, Co-Director of Family Support and Project Director, Parent Training and Information Center at Vermont Family Network. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everyone who signed up, who's watching this right now, or who is watching this in the future. My name is Bud Copeland. I am the Director of Membership and Engagement for the American Camp Association, New England. And finding a summer camp obviously is a timely topic right now, looking forward to the summer. But I think when you walk away from this, hopefully you'll understand that it really is a full, deep process it can seem daunting on the front end, but there are resources, there are networks, there are families, and there are friends out there like myself who are here to help you. And so that's why you'll see my name is Bud at acanewengland.org. I put that out there because while my primary job is to serve our membership, my membership's constituents and clients and customers are parents and families and campers. And so we have also a mission to serve the public as well. So hopefully at the end of today, we'll have a better understanding of kind of the camp experience writ large, and then specifically what it kind of looks like from a 30,000-foot view, finding a summer camp. Because as you get closer and closer to the camp that's for you or for your campers, you'll see that the work kind of shifts into the parent, and there's a little more due diligence that you need to do. But again, hopefully when you leave here, you'll understand that there are resources out there to help you get started. So who is Bud? My name is Bud Copeland. I'm the Director of Membership and Engagement for the American Camp Association, New England. We'll go through that real quick because I will share my quick camp story because I think it gives context to the stuff I'm going to say. What is ACA New England? We'll talk about that just a little bit briefly too, because the organization I work for and what we do is what helps me garner this experience and some of the anecdotes and meet some of the people like Karen and Martha and the folks at Vermont Family Networks that help me find new resources and make new connections to serve the camps. We'll talk about the camp year real quickly, kind of fall all the way through to fall, because again, I think a holistic understanding of what's going on that side helps people understand not when's the right time, but just understanding that when you're reaching out to camps or when you're searching for camps, what's on their end, just to know what's going on the other side. Then obviously we will talk about what we're here to talk about, which is finding a camp. And I'll talk about more specifics in that kind of the year from fall to fall, what it looks like from the family side, what's available out there, and how it's really never too late. It just does depend on what you're looking for and what your resources are in front of you. Then we will also talk about the connection to the school. There's an organic partnership or organic existence between the school year and the camp year. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Karen is the one that is going to be sharing some resources that can help bridge that gap for certain families. And then hopefully we will have time for some Q&A. There's already been some questions that came in before, and I can't wait to get to those. Better camping for all. I put this on here because this is over the fire mantle at the National Office of American Camping or the American Camp Association. And it's been kind of our unofficial motto mantra. I think we've changed from enriching the lives to changing the lives, but this has always been the unofficial internal mantra of better camping for all. And I put that on there as a reminder because that is kind of what we're always searching for. And camp and our population in New England is such a big, diverse group that every time we go this direction, we know that this direction could need some attention. So if I mention anything today that elicits one of those, hey, well, what about this? Please, like they said, feel free to drop in the chat. You can send me an email afterwards. I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime really about camp. So my name is Bud. I didn't get into camping until I was an adult. Never went to camp as a kid. I ran around in the woods, played on the beach. And it wasn't until I was in college that my sister basically bullied me into going to camp. She said, no, you're not going to be a beach bum this summer. You're going to go work at a camp in Maine. And I honestly never came back. I never went back down south for a summer. I've been up here for 20 some odd years since. Met my wife at camp. We got married at camp. And camp is a very special place, not just for people like me who find your wives in there, but for every human who interacts with it for various reasons. And we'll get into that in just a little bit on how deep and impactful it can be. ACA New England, I mentioned it up front, American Camp Association New England. The American Camp Association nationally is the membership body for camp professionals. So I almost use the analogy of a AAA auto club kind of thing, where whether it's resources, whether it's direct service, like I'm in a jam, I need help, whether it's conferences and educational activities, that's half of what we do. The other half, just like every nonprofit, we have a service or a product that we provide. And what ours is mainly to the public is the accreditation service. So the other half of what ACA New England does is we accredit 400 camps throughout New England, and they are day, overnight, tech, sport, traditional theater, you name it. There is a camp out there that's going to cover that, as well as the different populations that we serve. It's not just the content focus, it's about the people as well. So ACA New England, we accredit 400 camps. We have 1,300 members, and the accreditation process is, I bring it up because when you go searching for a camp, that's one thing that we feel very strongly about, is look for that accredited logo. I think it's right up there over my shoulder. And if it's not there, it's okay to ask, why aren't you accredited? Accreditation is a voluntary procedure. Camps that exist in different states might have local state licensing. They might have local, health requirements they have to meet, but ACA accreditation is fully voluntary, and it's all peer driven and volunteer driven. We have 200 camp directors and volunteers throughout the region that go out to the camps in the summertime. They walk through the processes. They see all the different standards to make sure they're met, everything from hiring to programming to health center and everything in between. The accreditation process follows that to make sure that camps are operating at the highest kind of peer reviewed agreed level. So those are the two big sides of what ACA New England does. But like I said at the top, none of this is possible without families, parents, campers. And so that's why we're here talking today. So the camp experience itself, whether you, a quick pause, a group I work with is emerging professionals, younger professionals who would like to grow in the game of camping. And it's funny because a lot of folks will say, I want to get in camping full time. It looks like it's a fun job. It is a fun job, but we also know that there's a limited amount of jobs. Not everybody is going to work at a camp, just like not every child is going to go to summer camp for 10 years, but every child or every young person can benefit from a summer camp experience. And I bring that up at the outset because summer camp really did start here in New England. You can talk to different organizations. The YMCA has their founding date. Girl Scouts has their founding date, but the camp experience by legend and lore started back in 1861 in Connecticut at what is now called the Frederick Gun School. Back then it was the gunnery. And it was during the Civil War era. And at the time, a lot of schools were being turned into military academies for obvious reasons. He saw the stress that was taking on his students. And so he decided to literally continue school away from school. They took a 20-mile hike. They went out for 2 weeks. They continued their classes. They didn't change much, but the actual environment. And that's when he recognized that when you remove these young people from their normal environment, they're willing to listen a little bit more. Their attention opens up. They're willing to take some risks because they feel safe when they're not around their peers like normal. So that's kind of why here in New England, we do peacock a little bit. There are 2,300 accredited camps across the country and thousands more that are, again, licensed or open, not necessarily accredited. So there are opportunities everywhere, but we like to proudly say it started here in New England. And so where is it going? Because there is a traditional idea of what camp is. And again, I just described, right, out in the woods, classes, bonfires, s'mores, whatnot. I don't know if they had s'mores back in the 1800s, but that's how it started. And when I say, where is it going? Well, now we have day camps. We have camps that people run out of their backyards. We have camps that are run at parks and recs departments that don't actually have a physical structure. They have a pavilion, but they run an accredited summer camp because camp is an experience, not necessarily a location. And as that experiential evolution grows, especially here in New England, we are trying to open it up to more avenues. What are populations that don't have enough camp presence? What are groups that traditionally have not been exposed to the camp experience that we need to get out and about? How can we take what we know works, getting a group of young people, whether they're campers or staff or a combination or families, there's plenty of great family camps in New England, and get them away into a safe environment where they can take risks and grow. There are certain core competencies within the camp experience that we'll go into in the next slide. But that's why it's so important, is because it started out of this idea that young people need to have a chance to kind of be away from it. There's a reason politicians or sports teams, they call it a camp when they want to take a group and get them out somewhere and get something done, because you have to be a little disarming. You have to be a little vulnerable. But if you're doing it in a safe space, like a summer camp, whether it's licensed or accredited or both, then it really can have a magical impact. And what our research shows, and acacamps.org, I'm going to share some websites and some stuff throughout this. It will all come in the follow-up email. I will share it with Martha and Karen and Rachel so that they can include these links. So you don't have to jot all this down, but acacamps.org we've done some great research over the years about what the impact of summer camp is. And what's funny is I'm sure everybody has heard of Forbes, pretty big. Forbes is a pretty big name in the world, financial Forbes. Well, every year they've been doing for the last few years, they've been doing a list of skills that employers want to see, the list of needs that they want. And 8 of the 10 of them are all soft skills. They're all these things like problem solving, relationships, coexistence, getting feedback from your peers. And we started looking at these articles and just checking boxes every time, because again, whether you're out in the woods or you're in a classroom, when it's a camp experience, this is what we're pushing. You're going to coexist with some other folks. They may be like you, they may be different from you, but you're going to coexist in a space for a common goal or reason. That might be a game of tag. It might be theater. It might be to accomplish something that others might see as minuscule, but to you in that group, that's the goal. And so that's kind of the essence of camp, is to develop these soft skills that we know, that some of the research that we've conducted has shown have been neglected, for lack of a better phrase. STEM education had a great focus for a long time, and we can't get rid of STEM education. It's not going anywhere, but it was almost at the expense of some of these softer skills that maybe we took for granted. So it is a great way to almost supplement any kind of educational experience, whether it's a week or a summer. That's a great place for kids to go, and adults to work on those soft skills. If you've got adult children that need a good summer camp experience, go have them work at a camp, but that's a talk for a different day. Family growth is another idea. I'm a new parent. Or another impact of camp. I'm a new parent myself. I have a 2.5-year-old kid. Her name is Cooper Rose. And I get it. I said to these folks beforehand, the kid gets born, access to the world tilts, everything changes. It's true. It scares me to death, the idea of being away from her for a night or two. So I can understand when, as camp professionals, we're like, come on, give me your kid for a week. It's a mind-blowing thing. But when it's done right and the due diligence is done up front, and you find out what you need to know about the camp, and you've connected with them, you've asked the questions, they're accredited or licensed, and you've done your homework, it's kind of the safest way to say go. And it's a good thing for the family to grow. We hear from families all the time after their first summer. Not every experience. And I will kind of quick caveat. I know I throw around words like parents and families kind of globally like that. And I go back to this is mostly from hours and hours and thousands of phone calls over the last 5 years with parents. And so I am drawing broad strokes, but more often than not, we get that call back that says, that was awesome. It was, obviously Timmy, Sarah, Sammy, they're all happy, but me and my partner, holy moose, like it was the first time that we had 2 nights in a row together, and it really kind of opened things up. So there can be more of that ripple effect for the camp experience outside of the child or the camper, so to speak. We don't use the word child in the industry. Everybody's a camper or staff, just to make it friendly. That's part of our brand. The financial impact that camp has, we are redoing, and I know this is a quick aside, but it is part of a community. Camp has a stigma, or a reputation for the right reasons. I talk about the camp bubble. Parents and everybody need to believe that it is as simple as Memorial Day comes, we open the doors, turn over some mattresses, and come on, campers, it's time for another summer. That's how we want it to feel, because it should feel, like we said, quaint, easy. You can be vulnerable. You can let your hair down. But on the backside, it's a business. It is a business, whether it's a for-profit camp or a nonprofit camp. It has to be run like a business to make sure it's going to deliver a quality product. And through tracking that, it's a big part of the New England economy. It's a $4.2 billion impact. And that was from a 2018 study that we did. We were supposed to re-up it in 2020. COVID has pushed that to this year, but it billions and billions of dollars into the local economy, both through the camps themselves. And then you talk about the grocery stores, the general stores, the vendors, everybody around it. So it is a big piece of this New England economy. I know, pardon me, that's a quick aside from the industry side. I know as a parent, it's like, great, it's still my money or somebody else's money, but I want to point that out because we want it to feel campy. There's a reason that adjective exists, but at the same time, know that we do take it seriously. And that's why I'm here. I say it all the time. If people have questions about the profession or the business of camp, give me a call. If I don't have the answer, it's going to be my job to go out and find it. And last but not least, I said it earlier, it's a natural extension of the school year. It was born out of the school experience. And so there is this continual learning that goes on. just a different type of learning. The content's a little bit different. The delivery is a little bit different, but when it's done right, it can have just as strong as an impact as, I'm not going to say AP physics because I didn't pass AP physics, but a good classroom course can have. The camp experience can deliver that just as well. Have any questions come in? I'm going to take a quick sip of my coffee. Martha, Karen, I'm just going to look for a thumbs up, thumbs down. Are we good to go? Continue. All right, beautiful. So finding a camp. It all sounds great. So where are the camps? That's what we're here to talk about. I'll go back for 1 second. I'm going to share a couple of resources. This is where I'm going to go off my slides, and I'm going to go to my browser for a minute because I do want to talk about the camp year and finding a camp kind of parallel. So we might do a little bit of this, and I hope that doesn't get confusing. But to find a camp, it does take time. And January is not a bad time to find camp. And a lot of families might start the summer before. As a matter of fact, most people will say that I talk to, families will call me in the middle to the end of the summer to talk about the following summer. But at any given point in the year, you can pick up this process and get started. But it starts with you, and it starts with the family. It starts with getting the stakeholders together, including the camper, and saying, this is something that we're going to undertake. I know a lot of parents will say they don't want to go. And I get it. I didn't want to eat my broccoli as a kid either, but I ended up eating it because it was good for me. And if as parents and as stakeholders, you say, this is the experience we want them to try. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, yes, camper. And by the end of the week, a lot of times those campers come back and they want to sign up for the next one. But it does begin with an internal conversation. Somebody sent a question in, like, what are the questions I should be asking both, internally and externally? And I'll get into the second part at the end when we do Q&A, but starting on the internal, it is talking to the camper and talking to your stakeholders. Are they ready for an overnight? Do we want a day experience? Are there special dietary, educational, physical, emotional, behavioral accommodations that we need to take into consideration? And it is kind of like taking stock, because you say, what kind of experience are we looking for? What kind of either accommodations or questions? Again, they're not necessarily accommodation. It could just be, what kind of food do you serve? Anything and everything under the sun, you would want to know. What time do you go to bed? What time is drop off? Do you have extended day coverage? Do you have transportation available? These are all the questions that I know it sounds kind of redundant, but you want to gather all of these up front. And at the end of the day, if you need help gathering those, you can send me an email. I'd be happy to talk to any parent. We also have blog posts out in the ether about how to find a summer camp, acacamps.org and acanewengland.org. We have information out there for parents. And again, if you can't find it, email me. But it starts with a conversation internally about what are the goals? Where do we want to go? What kind of experience are we going to be looking for? At the same time, in the fall, okay, because I'm going to use this kind of camp year scene, but know that even if it's January, if it's tomorrow, this would still be the same conversation. All right, we want to start looking for a camp. It's January, we got time. Obviously, like with anything else, kind of like with flights, the longer you wait, the tougher it might get. But at the same time, it's not undoable. But in a general kind of long term, if you have the time to wait for it or to do it, starting in the fall, looking at these questions, these conversations. At the same time, the camps are going to be, this is going to be some dates you might want to ask these camps or kind of be looking for on their websites, is registration. Registration for camps can open as early as right when they close the summer before, but I will say January, February, this is kind of that time to be looking mostly for day camps to open up, because they won't start their staffing and real heavy hiring until the new year. They spend their fall kind of rehiring old staff, taking stock, talking to old parents and families. But at the same time, at any given moment, if a camp director gets a question from a prospective family, they want to talk. Camp directors love talking, and they sure as heck love talking about their own camps. So as you have these questions, you want to make these outreaches. Just know that the feeling is mutual on the other side. I will say 9 times out of 10 from a camp director, they'll say, if we had only known. And then if we talk to a parent, they'll say, well, if we only knew to tell. So I almost kind of, say err on the side of oversharing when it comes to the information gathering process. We talked about some of the conversations. And there is no set list of questions. Like I said, we do have them available online, and I'm more than happy to talk about them one-off as well. But it is kind of the stuff around safety. What is your training program like for your staff? What are your staff ratios? And then again, if you're a waterfront, let's say you're going to send your child there and they want to get into water skiing, what are your safety protocols down on the water? This is another part where ACA writ large can come into hand, because our standards and accreditation guidelines are public knowledge. They're on the website. You can download them at a glance. And sometimes that helps parents kind of pick through, because you don't know what you're supposed to be asking. You want to ask some safety related questions, but until you see maybe the standards out there, you don't know where to look for them. But there are no dumb questions. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but there are no dumb questions. Almost all of these camp directors are parents before they're camp directors. I hear that line a lot, and there's a reason it's a line, because it's true. They say it. They've all got kids, and that's why, or most of them have kids, and that's why they're into this business. So be open, be upfront, and don't be bashful at all. And I say that, and allow me to help. I say it too. Sometimes I've gotten emails from parents. We don't necessarily want to contact the camp directly because they think that might get some sort of filtered or biased response, which it might. I've definitely filtered questions to camps before to say, hey, I'm hearing from some families about X. Do you have any perspective on that? So I keep going back to, there's no out of the box solution for finding your camp. It is a big, long process with some due diligence and some homework. But at the end of the day, the resources are out there to find. Last but not least, before I go into, like I said, sharing my screen with some website stuff, which I said I was going to do at the top, the tuition. Things cost money. And we have 400 accredited camps in New England, which means, again, law of large numbers. There's probably times 3 that aren't accredited, that are licensed, and they're smaller. And for whatever reasons, they're not accredited, which is perfectly fine. Like I said, our fee structures, just to give context, go from based on their revenue. And we do have camps that their revenue is $5,000 a year, but they run a 1-week accredited program. And so that's where they are, all the way up to the millions, because they're big properties and everybody in between. And I say that because tuition is has just as much variability in the camp world as it does just about anywhere else. Everything from free camps to camps that offer scholarship, financial aid. One of the big movements in camping right now is tiered pricing. So as you're looking at these camps in your websites, you might see a lot more about tiered pricing. And I even just did a quick list, because it's not a public list, but it's a private list for us. ACA works with even private camps. There are private for-profit camps that might not be able to qualify for scholarships or offer scholarships because they're for-profit organizations. We work with them and lend our ACA writ large, our nonprofit, to helping them create scholarships. So scholarships and affordability options, they're out there. Camps aren't always going to advertise it, but it's not an uncommon question. I worked for a very expensive camp in Maine for a number of years, and nobody knew that, probably a solid 10% of our campers were on some form of scholarship or another. And it's because it is available and it's out there. So I say that about tuition because I get it all the time. I agree. When I say it's expensive, I agree. I don't know where I'm going to send my little Cooper Rose when the time comes up, but when the time does come up, went to the wrong one. When the time does come up, I would like to hopefully think that I can lean on some of these resources right here. So these are some links and some of the stuff that I referenced earlier that I kind of want to run through before I go back to kind of the reason I'm here today, is to learn more from Karen about what she's going to talk about. That was eye-opening for me when we did our pre-meeting. But some of these base level resources that are out there, when you can say, all right, where do I start? So acacamps.org, and they have their Find a Camp tool. So you can go to find.acacamps.org. This is a database of all the camps in the country, say 4,000 camps. And earlier somebody said, well, Bud, you said there was 2,300 accredited camps. Exactly. It says anybody who runs a camp in the country can put their camp on this database. And I say that as both kind of like a here's a resource and a caveat, meaning the information that's on here is managed and updated by the camp. So when you get in here and you say, is it simple as day? And you can also come down and search by name. I mean, I worked at, there we go. There's some Camp Laurels out there, and you'll see state and everything like that. But I'm gonna go back up to the tool real quick, because this is where some of the parents will come in, and especially this population. Day camp, and you go next. Here's where the filters come in. You want to look for a day camp. And you can see there's this many camps with this many programs. It can feel overwhelming. I will say this, try not to go too deep into these filters. Location is definitely one that's going to be important to you all. And you can go by state or zip code, and it will generate these lists. So we can even say for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to select all camps that are in this database in Vermont. We can keep going deeper if we want to. And so there are some other filters in here. camps that specialize in serving a camper with this disability, not amputation. Sorry, that's a morbid one. I didn't mean to go there. ADHD. The problem is there could be a camp in Vermont that does this, but they haven't updated their Find a Camp profile to mimic that because it's a granular detail that they're not going to put in there. So I do say, be careful with this tool. And I would say try to keep it on the higher level. The higher you can, the better. If you go and you're finding out 0 camps that are overnight that serve this, pause. There's probably some sort of, because if you just do nobody that serves that kind of special population. I know that there are camps in Vermont that serve that specialized population. So that's where I would go back to the Find a Camp and just say day, next, and then location, and come down and find it that way. That's the national one. And again, I use it as that's a big net. If you were looking for kind of your starting point to find create a list here in New England, and this is acanewengland.org. Again, I'm going to share these links with folks for the follow-up. We have our own, what we call our Find a Camp map that just has the accredited camps. So for geographic purposes, if you're looking, all right, what's in my neighborhood, you can come down here and find out, and you click on them and you see who is around. And again, if it links to their website, so you can go out and you can learn more, because we heard from our membership, our localized membership, day, night, genders served in our website. That's kind of what they wanted for us to get out there to help people kind of gather their lists and start finding out where are these camps and who do I need to be reaching out to. Also, especially because we're talking to Vermont, I mentioned the Vermont Camp Association. They too have a Find a Camp tool. Again, all of these are just meant to be out there as directories, but I would stick with these that are from much more trusted sources. There are some commercialized Find a Camp tools out there. Some of them are great. Some of them are but these are a handful that we definitely lean on internally. And last but not least, this is in Massachusetts, but I bring this one up because if there is a parallel kind of resource or website out there, this would be good as well. Greater Massachusetts Special Needs Events. So these are camp fairs and all, especially, maybe some of the Western or Northern Massachusetts area might be serviceable to the Vermont families, or if you're going to be down in this area. So these are some of those online resources that can help you start your search to kind of gather that bank of camps to go, who's in my backyard to begin with. And with that, I am going to take a deep breath. I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to take a sip of my coffee and see if I missed anything up front, or can I please pass the baton over to what I've been waiting on, which is honestly, I talk about these resources and gathering your information and getting your questions and finding out your camps. There's another level of support that could be around that you might not be aware of. I wasn't aware of it. And that is this, like I said at the beginning, a strong connection between schools and summer camps. And I believe Karen's going to take over in a minute and kind of talk a little bit more about that as a potential resource or avenue to help you out in your search.
Okay, well, thanks, Bud, for all that information. So I guess I will take over my part of the presentation. So again, I work at the Vermont Family Network. So this information is specifically for families of children with disabilities who qualify for special education or Section 504. So I'll start off with the definition of what is called extended school year, or ESY. That's how I'll refer to it. It's one of those special ed acronyms. So what is ESY? ESY means special education and related services. Again, these are all special ed terms that are provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school day or year and at no cost to parents. IDA does not define the length of a school day or school year. So anything outside that can be considered ESY. So summer programming being one of those areas. So ESY services are determined by the IEP team, of which the parent is a member, or the Section 504 team, if the child is on a Section 504. Services must be in line with the child's IEP and necessary for the provision of FAPE, or free appropriate public education. Again, but these are all sort of specialized special education terms. So if schools do provide summer programming to children without disabilities, such as transportation or summer services, the same must be provided to students with disabilities. ESY goals can look differently from those during the regular school year. Although schools are not required to provide a full range of special education services during the summer, they must provide services that are in line with a child's IEP. So, for example, to help develop a child's gross motor skills during the summer, the plan might include bike riding or learning to swim. ESY services are not compensatory services. So there are a certain number of factors to consider if ESY is whether a child qualifies for ESY services. So ESY does have to be essential in helping your child meet the educational goals as set in the IEP. So to decide whether a child is eligible for ESY services, the team will consider the type and severity of the child's disability, and also evidence that the child experiences a significant loss of skills, which we call regression, that are not relearned in a reasonable length of time. One of the most important criteria in determining eligibility for summer services is how long it takes a child to relearn the skills that they might have lost over the summer. A child's transition goals may also require programming that takes place outside the regular school year. So transition is also a special education term, and in this case, we're talking about transition to adulthood. Other factors to consider. Does your child lose skills during school breaks or vacations? Do they catch up in a reasonable amount of time? How do school breaks or breaks in services affect your child's progress? Are there areas in your child's program which need ongoing attention? Is the summer program necessary for your child to keep from regressing in skill areas that they have already achieved? So summer services might include academic tutorials, physical therapy, speech language therapy, social skill development, as well as behavior management. Summer services can take place in a variety of locations, which includes summer and recreational programs. So these are action steps that we help parents when they are putting together information: to keep written notes on their child's progress, to talk to perhaps the last year's IEP or Section 504 team and to your child's current teachers to see if they have noticed a significant loss of skills during school break. Also to get written opinions from other professionals who might know your child. Ask for and collect data and understand your rights around, and again, these are rights around special education. There are specific procedural safeguards that are given to families whose children are eligible for special education. So what are the action steps? If a parent thinks that their child might need summer services, the first thing would be to ask for that meeting with the IEP or Section 504 team early enough in the year to allow the school district to plan for necessary services. So this is the reason for the timing of this specific workshop, because January would be a good time, even though you did say some families go all the way back to the previous summer. But usually we do say that January would be a good time to start talking about this topic with the school team. Definitely, no later than April. And this is also a section of the IEP that I have on the slide here. It has the specific section for the documentation of ESY services. So we also remind parents that the school district is not required to provide summer services unless they are written into the child's IEP or Section 504 plan. So this is a general slide on accommodations. So the American with Disabilities Act requires, again, it's about non-discrimination. So if a child with a disability attends a non-disability specific summer camp, ADA requires camps and recreational programs to provide reasonable accommodations. This generally means that children with disabilities are entitled to attend any camp or activity that non-disabled children attend. That camps must evaluate each child on an individual basis that camps must train their staff in the requirements of ADA. Camps must pay for the cost of any reasonable modifications necessary for disabled children to participate in camp activities, and parents should not be charged any additional fee beyond the standard camp enrollment costs. The U.S. Attorney Eric S. Miller, because there's a specific memo on this topic, has said summer camp is a wonderful opportunity for children, a place to try new things and gain confidence in themselves. All children who attend summer camp should have these opportunities. So a reasonable accommodation is one that does not fundamentally alter the nature of the program or services provided by the camp. It's kind of a technical piece, but that is how it is defined, and which also does not cause an undue burden on the program. Some parents that we know of have chosen to be part of that educational piece for staff in other campuses to help others understand about their child's disability and also to raise awareness and to build understanding. So this is just a slide to show how we do help parents with this process. It is a piece of that IEP that a parent does have to work with. So we do have our education helpline. And I just put a couple of specific resources in here that we do have a fact sheet that is entitled Summer Services, the Extended School Year. And we put out a summer camps list each year. The one that is on our website is still 2022. So I think we will be getting on it to update that as well. And that wraps up my section. Let me just stop sharing. So I'm
Thank you.
thinking we up for the Q&A part.
Thank you, Karen and Bud. So we do have a few questions. Bud, the first question I'm going to send to you is that list that you displayed earlier. How does a camp get on that list? What's the process? And you're muted.
See, I unmuted the Zoom. I muted my microphone. Speaking of lists, I'm going to go, Karen, when you do go to update the Vermont list, reach out to me. If we have camps that are on our list that are not on yours that we're allowed to share and we can, we'd love to help, make sure that we get as full of a list of the opportunities out there as we can. Martha, to your point, if you run a summer camp and you would like your camp to be on the ACA's Find a Camp tool, you just go to find.acacamp.org. And again, these are links I'll share for the follow-up email. And there is an option on there that just says add my camp. And it is a bit, and not a process. I mean, it's a paperwork process because you will be asked to fill out. The other option is email me and say, I have a summer camp. I would like to add it. And I can send you the instructions as well. You can go to acacamps.org. It's definitely, there's a link on there that says add my camp, or you can reach out to me and I can kind of help you out on the back end because you would probably need membership, which we do offer free individual membership in the American Camp Association, free 1-year membership, especially for things like this. Camp owner says, hey, want to put our stuff out there and kind of get our feet wet with the community. We say, come on in. And after a year, how was it? You want to keep going or not? So either bud@acanewengland.org or acacamps.org, either can help you out.
Thank you, Bud. So we have a few questions that have come in, and I invite all of our participants, after listening to both of the presentations, to give some thought to any questions you may want to add and put in the chat, and I'll certainly make sure that folks get to hear those. One of the questions was, what are the options for younger kiddos, pre-K to kindergarten, and what should people keep in mind when they're looking? And that's one for Bud.
That's a great question. I will say, full transparency, I have very little insight into anything kind of kindergarten or younger. And that's because to be accredited by ACA, there is an age threshold. And I want to say it's age 6 or age 5 or first grade. It's around there. So that's where most of the camps and people that we work with. Anecdotally, though, working with families, I will say, just like we've talked about, school or daycare setting is a great way to find out, maybe not directly through that care, but also there's your network and the humans that you're kind of coexisting with. But any other kind of child-centric organization, I really wish I had more kind of, one-to-one help for that age group, but I don't.
All right, and I see that Rachel, I think, put this up, the child care resource. If you're in the state of Vermont and you have that question, this would be a great resource for folks to tap into to answer some of those questions. So another question, are there any tech-focused opportunities, any programs that allow autonomy within a structured environment? I'm sorry, Bud, that one's for you too. I think Karen will get the next one.
No, sorry at all. I actually love that question because yes, and yes. The traditional camp experience is what it is. It's still very outdoorsy, hands-on, and engaging with nature. But tech as a kind of genre of camp is creeping into the traditional space, and it's got plenty of opportunity itself. Here in Massachusetts and Connecticut, there's a group of accredited tech camps called Imagination. They're on our acanewengland.org find a camp map, but Imagination, they specialize in tech camps, hence the name. But even that's another great question when you reach out to camps, though, because if you want a tech camp, yes, find a tech camp. Find somebody that says, we are a tech camp. In the morning, you're going to do programming. The afternoon, you do this. If tech is an important aspect of your camper's experience, still ask any camp director. I worked at a residential camp, and starting in 2001, by 2010, we did have a little bit of a quasi computer coding class. Photography had gone more digital. 5 years later, they introduced what they called social media live. So they were taking social media posts, but trying to create them in a live setting for a theater. So tech specific, you will be able to find that on their website. They're going to advertise it from the trees. We do programming, we do live action role playing that also does online. There's another camp I was working with. But to answer your question, they're out there. I would say Imagination is a great group of camps that run multiple sites. But if you're just looking for a tech part of the experience, ask the camp, because everything from music making to, I hate to bring it up, TikTok is becoming a class at some camps because they're trying to find a way to healthily channel the experience of making videos, and not necessarily saying we're gonna go play on TikTok. So tech is creeping into the camp world. We're holding on to the foundations of camp, but we're making new traditions, and tech's one of them.
Thank you. I will say to our viewers, years ago, and I don't know if this is still accurate, for the person that posed this question, there's a place in South Burlington called Panergy that used to run camps for kids that were around technology. I don't know if they still do it. Next question is for Karen. So Karen, if you're a parent and you are asking for extended school year services that look different than what is the school's offering, and you propose something different, what would that process look like if you're not in agreement with the school and what they've offered for extended school year?
Okay, well, before I answer that, I'll just go back to that childcare resource. I threw it up. So just to let folks know in Vermont that the childcare resource is, they can help with funding some of the summer camp expenses. And they can also help families access the special accommodations grant that can fund a one-on-one for children who might need that, because a one-on-one would not be considered a reasonable accommodation for a camp. The advice from CCR, Childcare Resource, is to contact them directly, because they can walk a parent through the needs of the child to come up with, summer camp information or access around funding to perhaps fund some accommodations your child might need. Okay, so Martha, you're talking about when a parent is in disagreement with the school over the services that are proposed. So just like any other disagreement on any part of the IEP, ASY being, part of that group, the parent does have rights, procedural safeguards, parental rights to disagree with the school. So that would take the form of an administrative complaint, mediation, or due process. So I would always advise parents that when they do run into that, when there is a disagreement, we always encourage families to work with the schools to work out some piece that does work for everyone, with the school, for the child, before having to engage in dispute resolution. But the process of dispute resolution exists if an agreement cannot be reached between the family and school. And, contact us, contact our family support consultants about dispute resolution if you do have any specific questions around that.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Martha, do you mind real quick if I piggyback on something Karen said, because a question came in earlier and you referenced one-on-one
Yes.
aid, just real quick, because Karen, I'm glad you said that. I was looking for an answer to that. I reached out to a couple of camps that do, they publicly run quote unquote special needs camps, or camps with that children need additional accommodations, using their language. And I just asked them, this question came in, how do you kind of approach it? And they said, this is from the camp director, while we don't provide one-on-one staffing, we have a variety of ways that campers can attend a session if they need extra support. Most of the time, campers are able to attend with our 1-to-2 staff to camper ratios. But over time, work with families who sent a camp caregiver with the camper, but the family does cover the cost of that. So it was one of those things you said, so is that like, I've been working with teenagers too much. When you reference that 1-to-1 aid is not necessarily deemed a reasonable accommodation, is that ruled upon? Is that a statute, or is that like a legal case that just 1-to-1, that's a hard and fast rule, is not considered a reasonable accommodation?
No, I'm not
Okay.
going to say anything about
Okay.
hard and fast rules. And as in anything that is legal, we are not attorneys and cannot offer legal assistance. So the term is reasonable, accommodations, not altering the fundamental nature of a program. So any costs that would be considered not that would be,
Right.
Not reasonable for a camp to also bear. That being said, in practical purposes, in most cases, what we do see is the one-on-one support does have to be, is not required of the summer camp itself. And that's why, as I mentioned, that special accommodations grant that we have in Vermont,
Yeah.
that is a specific funding that families can apply for to get that one-on-one help.
Thank you both. Like I said, I'm here to learn as well. And that's why I heard that. I just wanted to clarify the language for my own internal purposes, so I don't go out misquoting. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Martha.
Okay, well, we're getting a few more questions coming in. So this one again is for Bud. Does Bud know of any good camp environments for kids who need a lot of autonomy in a structured environment? My child's disability, PDA, pathological demand avoidance, a type of autism, means that standard group environments are inaccessible to him.
The short answer is yes. I'd be hypocritical to say that there's a camp for everybody, but not that scenario. But when you say kind of organized autonomy, in a structured environment, that a lot of times that's how most camp experiences are trying to be structured. Now, when you introduce that other variable and you need a little more autonomy or a little more room, it sounds like, for that specific scenario. I don't know any off the top of my head. That's a specific kind of granular program level question you would want to talk to a camp director, because two camp directors might have a different definition of what enough space could be. So that is one I wish I could say, yeah, absolutely, reach out to this one. There's not a hard and fast kind of off the shelf answer to that.
Thank you. There's another question that came up. Is anyone going to cover issues around helping parents find assistance with tuition and transportation? I'm a school services clinician in Vermont, and those are the biggest obstacles for our families.
So I would say that the childcare resource, would be a place that a parent or professional can go to see what, as I actually did attend a brief informational session from them, and they can provide stipends for a number of camps in Vermont, as well as, again, providing funding through that special accommodations grant for specific accommodations a child might need. But their advice, because I did ask them for a list to maybe give out to families, but their advice really is to contact them directly so that they can work with the specific needs of the child. Thank
you. So it looks like we have one more question, unless folks are percolating and thinking about some other things. The last question I currently have is, what are good questions to ask camps about accommodations for a child? What strategies for a smooth transition between camps and outside support staff?
I'll say from, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to read it twice, but go ahead.
Please do read it twice, because that last part, the transition part, was what I got caught up on at the end.
Okay. What are good questions to ask camps about accommodations for a child? And what strategies for a smooth transition between camps and outside support staff?
On the front end, because I think questions to camp directors it's another one of those, I wish I had a list, but it's being as direct as you can. How do you work with campers who need X? How do you work with staff who need X? How, and literally just asking, what are your policies or procedures around a specific accommodation? One of the ones I had a young Karen, or I think it was Karen earlier, mentioned, and we actually would have parents that would come out and talk to our staff. We had a camper for 3 summers, and he was allergic to everything under the sun. I mean, grass, nuts, pollen. And I mean, so it was a very kind of, and we're going to send them out in the woods for 3.5 weeks, but we reassured, we knew we could do it safely, and we had protocols, EpiPens, everything was everywhere. But the key piece to it was, as Karen pointed out, this mom would come and talk to the staff, and not a scare tactic, a very reality, like, I'm giving you my kid. This is what happens if he eats nuts. This is what happens if he gets exposed to this, and this is what happens to you there. Making it real, because it's, trying to get these 19, 20, and sometimes 17 or 27-year-olds to kind of look at your child as their own. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. So we have to find another way for them to see how real and how official it is. For many of these young people, it's their first job. So asking these directors about how they train their staff, how do they empower them with safety? I say that parents just want to know their kids are going to come home happy, healthy, and having learned things and made a friend. That's kind of the whole camp experience. And so questions, it's anything you want to know. I mean, quite frankly, I hate to be kind of, well, the answer is, you've already got the answer, but it is true, because it's going to be whatever's important to you. I might want to make sure my daughter gets up at a certain time because she's got school reading that she's been doing. Or if it's a day camp, I might have a certain tutoring on Tuesdays that I've got to go to at 11. Anything under the sun, whether it's academic, emotional, or health related, is not off limits. But as far as approaching the camp directors, focusing on staff training, safety, and preparation, kind of how they approach it versus are you set up for this camper? Because any kind of binary answer, if it's difficult, human nature, they might take the easy way out, when that's not really what they were trying to, get at. It's how can we meet you in the middle? Because camp directors want to, if they can. And as Karen pointed out, if they can, then they have a responsibility to do so.
Thank you.
And
So
then another piece, Martha, with
Please,
that
please.
is, if a summer camp is in a child's IEP as an ESY piece, the parent can ask for some training to be provided to the summer camp from the school as part of that service. So then the parent can ask that professionals or educational professionals help to train staff in that ESY program in meeting the child's needs. So again, it would have to be written into that IEP as a specific service. And as everything else in the IEP process, it has to go through the IEP process for that to happen.
thank you. I think this is our last question, and the person that submitted this came in a little bit late, and I think this question may have been answered, but I'm going to throw it over anyway. I have yet to find a camp willing to accept my son without us paying for a 1-to-1 full-time, which we cannot afford. Are these camps ones that accept children with special needs without the added financial burden on families? And I do think that what Karen mentioned earlier, and maybe we can revisit that, about the special grants, the special accommodation grants, and also maybe addressing that if this was a placement for ESY by the school. Karen, I'll field this one to you.
Right. So if ESY services are to be provided at no cost to the parent, so if that is the case, then all the supports and services a child needs in order to access the ESY services would not be borne by the parent. So that's one piece. If the entire camp is written into the ESY services, the school would be responsible for all the costs. And then again, the other piece, though, is applying for the special accommodations grant. And I believe schools can do that also, perhaps in collaboration with the parent. I don't know about the actual application piece, but that, again, is why that grant, that is a big piece of what that grant does fund. I believe there are other pieces of types of services the special accommodations grant can fund, but that is one of their primary uses for that.
Okay.
Because again, that terminology for what the camp must pay for, it must be a reasonable accommodation. And again, Bud, that has caused some, situations to go to court to define
Yep.
what a reasonable accommodation is. And that's why I will not make a blanket statement.
I know,
about
and I'm
whether or
glad
not
you did that
includes-
because the way
yes.
it came out earlier, I was like, wait a minute, is that hard and fast? And like you were pointing out, no, there's no hard and fast, but thank you.
The word a reasonable accommodation, that is the hard and fast. The interpretation of reasonable accommodation, right? That's where it comes.
Okay, so another question came up for Karen. Does the training only apply to ESY services? What about external to ESY? ESY only covers 4 weeks of the summer. I don't think ESY is defined with a timeline. I do know it's defined by, it may look different than the rest of the school year, but there's no delineation that it must be 4 years. So Karen, and this may be our last question, I think. I don't think we have any more after this.
So Martha is right, as ESY is defined as any time that is outside the normal school day or year. So it is not, there's no 4 weeks piece. I see your question, Kristen. Yeah, that would be an IEP team decision. And it sort of goes back to Martha's initial question. If there's disagreement between the parent and the school as to the nature of the ESY services, so that would include the length of time, the nature of it, the spots that are necessary, that dispute resolution is always an option if the disagreement cannot be worked out between the parent and the school. And in that case, I would say, give us a call, give our family support consultants a call to help you work through that piece.
Thank you, Karen. So that being our last question, I'd like to thank Bud and Karen for this really helpful information. You will see a link to the evaluation in chat. Please do take a few minutes to complete it so we can make improvements and fulfill our grant requirements. We have many more interesting workshops coming up, and you can find details on our homepage of our website, which is vermontfamilynetwork.org, along with links to previously recorded ones. And my goodness, we have lots of them. We have tons of information on our website, and getting connected with us is very easy. You can follow us up on Facebook or join our closed Facebook page if you're a parent. We also have 2 closed Facebook groups, one for parents of children with disabilities and special health needs, and one for those with children with adult children. Yes, you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter or contact or check out our YouTube channel. We're here to help, so please contact us by phone or email. Also, I know most recently we are now on Instagram, so please do look for us. This is brand new for our organization. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day. We really appreciate your attendance, participation, and to both our speakers, thank you for all this helpful information.